Cynthia Hubbard here from St. Andrew's in Edgartown to share a few thoughts with you about love. Yes, love, which is something I speak about frequently. It seems to be an almost universal answer to the challenges of life. But as this country is gripped by anguish and suffering, and I might add, opportunity to change the world in a meaningful way for the better, my go-to answer is beginning to sound a bit like a platitude, or perhaps I should say, in need of fleshing out. At least it does for me. So with that in mind, I turn to my go-to guide and advisor for ponderings of this sort, none other than Jesus himself. Besides commanding us that we should love one another as he loved us, and telling us that as his followers, we should be known by how we love each other, what exactly did Jesus say about love? It's a great sentiment, and at some level we all know what it means. Or do we? I found myself looking at just how Jesus modeled and exemplified the love he commanded us to engage in. A few examples came to mind, although I'm sure there are many others, and I hope you might think of others to share and thereby continue this conversation. But the first example for me was the encounter with the Samaritan woman at the well. Here is a classic example of the other. A woman, a Samaritan. Remember, the Jews and the Samaritans couldn't stand each other, and she was out and about by herself in the middle of the day. Certainly grounds for scandal at the very least. But Jesus is not put off. Quite to the contrary. He engages her in conversation and does so as they talk past each other wildly until finally they come to a place of understanding. He's honest with her, promoting her honesty in return, and he never judges her, inviting her to be who she is and to enter into relationship with him. A second example of what it means to love comes from the parable of the Good Samaritan. The answer Jesus gives to the question, and who is my neighbor? Oh yes, there's that hated Samaritan again. Turns out, according to Jesus, how you love your neighbor is to tend to his or her injuries, whatever the scope of those injuries might be, bandage them up, literally or perhaps figuratively, take that person somewhere where he or she can be safe and cared for, and furthermore, pay for whatever services may be needed until you can follow up on the person's well-being. Then there's the day that Jesus loses his temper in the temple, overturning the tables where sacrificial animals are being sold, and throwing out the moneylenders, reminding them that the expression for God through worship transcends financial transactions, including, I imagine, who has money for expensive animals and who has not. Anger is a very real form of love, especially when it comes under the title of righteous indignation. If we don't get angry and act on that anger when we see wrongs or injustice being done, then I don't think we are taking seriously Jesus' commandment to love. Finally, I am reminded of the two thieves that are crucified with Jesus, and in particular, the one who saw in Jesus the injustice of his punishment. Again, there is a conversation, a brief one, but in those few words, there is acknowledgement of their shared humanity, and Jesus joins with the thief in the solidarity of their shared human condition, the condition of sinfulness. When the thief asked for forgiveness, Jesus invited him into a relationship with him in God's kingdom. In all these examples, Jesus does or says something that eliminates the power differential between himself, or the Samaritan in the parable, and the other person, allowing for equality in the relationship, not lording over, not putting down, not subjection or oppression, not judgment, but acknowledging that the other is also equally a beloved child of God. So where might that bring us in our fleshing out of Jesus' commandment to love? Entering into open, honest conversation without judgment until a place of understanding is reached, caring for others in distress, ensuring their safety and financial wholeness, the ability to be angry and express that anger whenever injustice and wrong call for it, acknowledging our essential humanity in our shared sinfulness, forgiveness when it is called for, and in all things eliminating the power differential that so sadly tends to oppress another, not in a place of power. Perhaps the way of Jesus can help us as we struggle to find ways to love today in a meaningful way. And remember, all those good words were from a brown-skinned Middle Eastern Jew. That in itself is worth pondering.